Hello and welcome to Lesson 7 on Minority Influence. In this session we are going to look at minority influence, including reference to consistency, commitment and flexibility as it pertains to that subject. You'll need to be able to describe and explain the concept of minority influence as well as Moscovici's study in detail. We'll do some evaluation of both at the end, and then we'll look at some exam style questions that you will have to complete for class next lesson. Moscovici et al. 1969. So in this study, famous study, 6 participants, 2 of which were Confederates, were asked to judge the colour of the series of slides. All the slides were blue, and yet the Confederate minority were instructed to say that they were green. In one condition, they were instructed to say they were green consistently, and in an additional condition, they were inconsistent, sometimes saying blue, sometimes saying green. What Moscovici found that was in the consistent condition, the minority influenced the majority around 8% of the time. If we have a look at his original chart, we can see a consistent minority is far more effective at convincing the majority than an inconsistent minority. Consistency is important because when we're confronted with consistent opposition, we will often, if we're part of the majority, sit up and take notice, so it grabs our attention. Consistency gives the impression that the minority are convinced and committed to their viewpoint. The majority can be confronted with someone with self-confidence and dedication, and this leads us to assume, maybe she's got a point. Why else would he or she be so committed? And a consistent minority disrupts established norms. It breaks the unanimity, causes doubt and conflict, and this can lead to the majority taking the minority view seriously and question their own view in the process. Conversion. Moscovici says that once we adopt the minority view, this position becomes deep and long-lasting. It's essentially internalized. Flexibility. We have to be careful with consistency though, because it can seem rigid and dogmatic. The key is to be consistent but flexible and compromising. And these 2 variables have been shown to increase the effectiveness of minority influence. We must also appear to be reasonable and cooperative. Identification. Mass carried out a very interesting study in which he got a gay minority to advocate for gay rights to a non-gay majority. They were far less effective than when it was a straight minority advocating for those same rights to a straight majority. They concluded that this was because the straights identified with the straights and therefore took their point more seriously, whereas when the straights were dealing with the gay minority, they saw them as being different from themselves, self-interested, and concerned with promoting their own particular cause, and therefore were mistrustful of it. So identification is important. This has applications for real life, and we can look back in our own history and find times that minorities have actually achieved influence. One case that you'll be familiar with is that of the suffragette movement in the early 20th century. This was a tiny group of women who were incredibly unpopular, but through consistency and dedication and demonstrating that they were willing to suffer for their beliefs and ideas, eventually the majority came to accept their point of view. However, check out the caveat in the guide notes on the suffragettes. Evaluation them. Van Dine and Saavedra found that having a dissenting group minority actually was beneficial to the majority. They found that it allowed the majority to make better decisions, which has implications for business, as we'll see later. Evidence for flexibility comes from Nemeth and Brillmeyer. They found that in mock jury trials, the minority were more influenced if they demonstrated a willingness to compromise with the majority. Z et al. 2011 found that you could tip the minority to the majority with a percentage of just 10%. And Mackey suggests that we do not actually spend much time processing the minority's message. This suggests that many minorities' messages do not actually get processed by the majority and are largely ignored. Moscovici, as a study, it was a lab experiment, artificial task, lacks ecological validity, but also it suffered from sample bias. Unlike many of the most famous studies in social influence that used only men, Moscovici used only women, and that presents exactly the same problem. Some research shows, for example, that women tend to conform at higher rates, and there are many sort of evolutionary reasons why that might be the case. But that means that if Moscovici is using female participants, we can't easily generalize to men, and that makes the validity, external validity of the study limited. You could use any of these 5 points in an essay, ideally all, in a PE format. We'll look at PE in just a second. So exam style questions. Please complete these and bring your answers with you to class next time. Okay, AO2 style question. Honor told her friends that she ate nothing but salads, which her friends thought was a little strange. Every day, Honor told them of the benefits of eating salad, which she said increased her intelligence and made her feel super fit. Honor seemed so convinced of the benefits of salad that her friends decided to buy some for lunch the next day. On their way to the supermarket, they passed the burger restaurant and saw Honor eating a big juicy burger. Later, Honor asked her friends if they were going to become salad eaters too. No, they replied. Using your knowledge of research into minority influence, explain why Honor was unsuccessful in changing her friends' eating behavior. 3 marks. Remember, you must reference directly the STEM. Bring your answers to class with you. We'll look at some model answers. AO3 example, and then you're going to be practicing one yourself. Van Dine and Saavedra, 1996, found that having a dissenting group minority allowed the majority to make better decisions. Turn this into a PE. Well, research has shown that minority influence can have practical benefits, blah, blah, blah. The research itself, and then the benefits of that research and why it matters. Here I've used an example of why banks would be, it would be a good idea for banks to employ this method. Now it's your turn. You can go back, have a look at my structure, but turn this into a PEE. Minority influence is not always effective at win over the majority because the message is often not processed deeply. Evidence for this I would use is Mackey, and then explain why that matters. Okay, that's all we have time for in this session. As you'll see, this video is very short, as is the section on minority influence. You must read carefully the guide notes, and they've been annotating as you go, but ensure that you understand precisely what the key evaluation points are and Moscovici's original study. If you find that you're finished in about 30 minutes, this whole thing in activities, please use 30 minutes remaining to go back over everything you have learned for approaches and social influence. If you create those connections now, they will be more resistant when it comes to revision. As always, thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you in school.